I was 28 years old when I choked on my own blood on the imported marble floor of my sister's penthouse. My mother, the woman who was supposed to protect me, knelt beside me, her hands pinning my shoulders down. She watched with cold, dead eyes as my twin sister, Chloe, plunged a syringe full of industrial antifreeze into my neck. I didn't die because I was a threat. I died because I had finally found the piece of paper that proved my entire life of poverty, abuse, and failure was a manufactured lie. The venom burned through my veins like liquid fire, a searing agony that paralyzed my lungs and clouded my vision. Above me, the grand chandelier of Chloe's Chicago penthouse fractured into 1,000 mocking stars. "Stop looking at me like that, Harper," Chloe sneered, tossing the empty syringe onto the blood-splattered Persian rug. She was wearing a custom Chanel suit, her blonde hair perfectly blown out, the absolute picture of a Silicon Valley billionaire. "You were always so dramatic. It's just business." "You stole it," I gasped, the metallic taste of blood pooling in my mouth. My fingers twitched, desperately trying to reach the crumpled document I had found in our mother's wall safe just an hour ago. It was a faded, yellowing piece of paper from 2004, the official results of the Milton Academy Exceptional Youth Assessment, the test that determined which children possessed genius-level intellects, granting them a full-ride scholarship to the most prestigious boarding school in the country, and a guaranteed trust fund from the state's billionaire philanthropic board. For 20 years, I was told I scored in the bottom third. I was labeled slow, average, a burden, while Chloe was paraded around as a child prodigy, shipped off to Milton, Harvard, and eventually handed the reins of a tech empire. I was kept locked in the basement. I was forced to clean houses, pay rent to my own mother, and swallow the daily humiliation of being the idiot twin. But the paper in my hand told the truth. Harper Bennett, score 99.9th percentile. Chloe Bennett, score 42nd percentile. "Mom, switch them," I wheezed, staring up at Rebecca, our mother. Rebecca didn't even flinch. She just smoothed out her cashmere sweater. "Chloe was prettier, Harper. She looked like my side of the family. She had the charm to survive in high society. You were always so quiet and mousy. You would have wasted that genius at a desk. Chloe used it to give us a life of luxury. You should be thanking us. I cleaned your toilets while you stole my future." I choked out, my vision tunneling into darkness. "And now, you're going to quietly pass away from an accidental overdose." Chloe smiled, crouching down to pry the paper from my stiffening fingers. "Goodbye, sister. Don't worry. I'll pay for a nice, cheap funeral." The coldness seeped into my bones. My heart gave one final agonizing shudder, and then nothing. Just an endless, suffocating black void. I screamed into the darkness, a scream of pure, unadulterated hatred. If I could just go back, if I just had one chance to stop her. Then I smelled it, not the sterile scent of Chloe's penthouse, nor the metallic tang of blood. It was the sharp, acrid smell of burning cheap bacon and stale Virginia Slims cigarettes. I gasped, my eyes snapping open. My chest heaved, pulling in desperate lungfuls of air. I wasn't on a marble floor. I was lying on a lumpy, spring-shot twin mattress. The ceiling above me was stained with water damage, peeling off in ugly yellow flakes. I scrambled backward, my back hitting the cheap wood of the headboard. My hands flew to my neck, searching for the puncture wound. Nothing. My skin was smooth. I looked down at my hands. They weren't the calloused, scarred hands of a 28-year-old maid. They were tiny, soft, the hands of a child. "Harper, get your lazy behind out of bed. You're going to make Chloe late." The voice sliced through the thin drywall. It was my mother, but she didn't sound like the polished, Botox-filled socialite she had become. She sounded young, shrill, and stressed. Trembling, I swung my short legs over the side of the bed and rushed to the cracked mirror hanging on the closet door. Staring back at me was an 8-year-old girl with messy brown hair, wearing an oversized, faded t-shirt. I spun around and looked at the bedside table. A chunky digital clock glowed with red numbers, 7 a.m. Next to it was a tearaway calendar. Friday, May 14th, 2004. My breath hitched. I squeezed my eyes shut and slapped my own face hard enough to sting. It wasn't a dream. I was back. I was exactly 20 years in the past. May 14th, 2004. The date was burned into my soul. It was the day of the Milton Academy Exceptional Youth Assessment. A cold, terrifying calm suddenly washed over me. The panic and confusion evaporated, replaced by a crystalline clarity. In my previous life, I had walked into that school today, taken the test, and poured my heart into every question, unknowingly signing my own death warrant. Mom had been a volunteer hall monitor that day. She had used her access to sneak into the principal's office during the lunch recess, peeling the barcode ID stickers off my test booklet and swapping them with Chloe's. It was so simple, so disgustingly easy, and it had destroyed my life. "Harper!" The bedroom door flew open. Rebecca stood there, wearing a cheap floral robe, a lit cigarette dangling from her lips. She glared at me with undisguised contempt. "Are you deaf?" I said, "Get dressed. Today is the big day for your sister. I won't have you ruining it by making us miss the bus." I looked at the woman who would one day hold me down while I was murdered. A smile, slow and chilling, crept onto my 8-year-old face. "I'm sorry, Mommy," I said, my voice dripping with an innocent sweetness I didn't feel. "I'll get ready right now. We wouldn't want Chloe to miss her big test." Rebecca blinked, momentarily taken aback by my obedience, before scoffing. "Just hurry up and wear the gray sweater. The good pink one is for Chloe." She slammed the door. I walked over to my closet, my heart pounding a steady rhythm of war. "You want a genius, Mother?" I thought, pulling the ragged gray sweater over my head. "I'll show you exactly what a genius can do." The cafeteria of Oak Park Elementary was buzzing with the nervous energy of 200 8-year-olds. We were all seated at long folding tables, separated by cardboard dividers. At the front of the room stood Dr. Eris Gallagher, the imposing silver-haired headmaster of the Milton Academy. He looked like an aristocrat who had accidentally wandered into a public school, checking his gold pocket watch with clear disdain. Beside me, separated by a thin piece of cardboard, sat my twin sister, Chloe. She was wearing the pristine, pink cashmere sweater Mom had bought specifically for today. She had a set of brand new glitter gel pens neatly lined up on her desk, humming happily to herself. She didn't have a care in the world. Why would she? She was Mommy's favorite. "Listen closely, children." Dr. Gallagher's voice boomed through the microphone, commanding instant silence. "This assessment is not a standard test. It will measure your logical reasoning, pattern recognition, and mathematical intuition. You have 3 hours. Do not look at your neighbor's paper. The barcode sticker on the top right corner of your booklet is your only identifier. Do not remove it." I stared at the barcode sticker on my booklet. Student ID 8849H. I glanced over the cardboard divider. Chloe's booklet had a matching sticker. Student ID 8852C. In my past life, Mom had used her volunteer badge to enter the holding room while Dr. Gallagher was at lunch. She simply swapped the stickers. When the Scantron machines graded them, my perfect answers were logged under Chloe's ID. "You may begin," Dr. Gallagher announced. I opened the booklet. The questions that had seemed incredibly difficult to me 20 years ago were now insultingly easy. I had lived a lifetime. I had secretly read Chloe's college textbooks while cleaning her room. I had taught myself advanced calculus and behavioral psychology in the dark basement, just to keep my mind sharp. I tore through the math section in 15 minutes. The spatial reasoning puzzles were a joke. By the 1-hour mark, I was completely finished. I peeked over the divider again. Chloe was chewing on her pencil, her face red with frustration. She was barely on page 3, silently crying as she stared at a basic logic puzzle. I needed to act. Swapping the stickers was a physical act. If I just told Dr. Gallagher my mom was going to cheat, he might not believe an 8-year-old. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed to let the trap snap shut, but with Mom's neck inside it. I raised my hand. Dr. Gallagher, walking down the aisle, paused and looked at me, raising an eyebrow. "Finished already?" he whispered, glancing at his watch. "You still have 2 hours. I suggest you check your work, young lady." "I need to use the restroom, sir," I whispered back, making my eyes wide and watery. "It's an emergency," he sighed, signaling for a volunteer to escort me. As I stood up, I deliberately dropped my pencil. It rolled under the table, right next to Dr. Gallagher's polished leather shoes. I ducked under the table to grab it. While I was shielded from view, I reached into my pocket, pulling out a sharp sewing needle I had stolen from Mom's kit that morning. Quickly, violently, I pricked the tip of my left index finger. A bright bead of crimson blood welled up. I popped back up, clutching my pencil. Before the escort could lead me away, I subtly pressed my bleeding finger onto the bottom corner of page 45 of my test booklet, the final essay section. It left a perfect, unmistakable bloody fingerprint in the paper's fibers. It couldn't be erased. It couldn't be peeled off. I went to the bathroom, washed the blood away, and returned to my seat, quietly closing my booklet. At noon, the bell rang. "Pencils down," Dr. Gallagher ordered. "Leave your booklets on your desks. Our volunteers will collect them and place them in the secure lockbox in the principal's office. You are all dismissed for lunch." As we filed out, I saw her, my mother, wearing a yellow volunteer lanyard, was standing by the cafeteria doors, smiling warmly at the teachers. As Chloe walked past, Mom pulled her into a tight hug, kissing her forehead. "How did it go, my little genius?" Mom cooed. "It was too hard," Chloe whined, stomping her foot. "I didn't know any of the math." Mom's smile didn't waver. She just stroked Chloe's blonde hair. "Don't you worry about a thing, sweetie. Mommy is going to make sure everything turns out just perfect. Go play." Mom didn't even look at me as I walked past. She was already staring at the stacks of test booklets the teachers were gathering. Instead of going to the playground, I slipped into the shadows of the hallway and crept toward the principal's office. I hid behind a large potted fern near the door. For 20 minutes, I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, the hallway emptied as the teachers headed to the staff lounge. The coast was clear. Mom practically glided down the hall. She looked around, her eyes darting nervously, before she pulled a stolen master key from her pocket. She slipped it into the principal's door, turned it, and vanished inside. I didn't try to stop her. I didn't scream. I just stood behind the fern, a dark, cold smile spreading across my face. Go ahead, Mother, I thought. Sign your own death warrant. 5 minutes later, she emerged, looking flushed but victorious. She locked the door behind her and scurried away. As soon as she was gone, I didn't run away. I walked straight down the hall to the staff lounge, where Dr. Gallagher was sitting alone, sipping a cup of black coffee and reading the Wall Street Journal. I knocked timidly on the open door. He looked up, slightly annoyed. The cafeteria is that way, young lady. Dr. Gallagher, I said, making my voice tremble. I forced tears into my eyes, letting them spill over my cheeks. I need to tell you something bad, but you can't tell my mommy, please. She'll hurt me. The annoyance on his face vanished, replaced by sharp, immediate concern. He set his paper down and leaned forward. What is it? Are you hurt? No, I sniffled, wiping my nose on my ratty sleeve. When I was coming back from the bathroom, I saw my mommy. She went into the principal's office with a key. She told my sister this morning that she was going to fix her test so she could be rich. I think she stole the stickers. Dr. Gallagher's face went rigid. The Milton Academy prided itself on absolute, impenetrable integrity. Cheating was the ultimate sin. Are you absolutely sure about what you saw? He asked, his voice dangerously low. I'm sure, I whispered. My test is the one that has a little drop of blood on the last page. I accidentally cut my finger. If my sticker says Chloe's name, then Mommy did a bad thing. Dr. Gallagher stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the linoleum. Stay right here, he commanded. I sat in his chair, swinging my short legs, drying my fake tears. The game was set. The board was locked. It was time to watch the pieces fall. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in psychological torture, but this time I was immune to it. Our cramped house in Ohio was practically buzzing with Mom's manic energy. She was absolutely convinced that she had secured Chloe's future. She drained what little savings she had and maxed out 2 credit cards to buy Chloe a brand new wardrobe. Every evening was spent looking at the glossy brochures for the Milton Academy, discussing dorm room decor and Ivy League pipelines. When you get to Milton, Chloe, you'll be mingling with the children of senators and CEOs, Mom would say, brushing Chloe's hair at the dinner table while I scraped burnt casserole out of a pan in the sink. You'll be a star. We're finally getting out of this dump. What about Harper? Chloe asked one evening, mouth full of spaghetti. She didn't ask out of concern. She asked out of mockery, looking at me with a smirk. Mom didn't even glance in my direction. Harper will go to the public school. It's where she belongs. The world needs ditch diggers too, sweetie. You can't expect a donkey to win the Kentucky Derby. I scrubbed the pan in silence, my reflection in the soapy water completely unbothered. Let them talk. Let them build their glass castle as high as they wanted. It would only make the shatter more spectacular. Finally, the day arrived. It was a Saturday. The mail truck pulled up to the curb at exactly 11:30 a.m. Mom practically sprinted out the front door in her slippers, ignoring the rain. When she came back inside, she was clutching a thick, cream-colored envelope with the heavy gold wax seal of the Milton Academy. Her hands were shaking violently. Arthur! Arthur, get in here! She shrieked. My father, a passive, tired man who worked 60 hours a week at a hardware store and usually ignored his family's toxic dynamics, shuffled out of the living room. What is it, Rebecca? You're screaming. It's here! The results! Mom was hyperventilating with joy. She dropped to her knees in front of Chloe, holding the envelope out like it was the Holy Grail. "Open it, baby. Open your future." Chloe snatched the envelope, tearing it open without an ounce of grace. She pulled out a heavy parchment letter and a smaller, secondary envelope. "Well, read it," Mom urged, tears of joy streaming down her face. Chloe frowned, struggling with the cursive font. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Bennet," she read slowly, "we are delighted to inform you that your daughter has achieved a score of 99.9 percentile on the Milton Exceptional Youth Assessment." Mom screamed, a piercing sound of absolute triumph. She grabbed Chloe and spun her around. "I knew it. I knew you were a genius. We're rich, Arthur. The state grant is going to pay for everything." "Wait," Dad said, stepping forward, a confused look on his face. He plucked the letter from Chloe's hand. He adjusted his glasses, reading the text himself. The color slowly drained from his face. "What is it, Arthur?" Mom snapped, annoyed that he was ruining her moment. "Does it say when the orientation is?" Dad looked from the letter to Chloe, and then slowly over to me, standing quietly in the corner of the kitchen. "Rebecca," Dad said, his voice trembling slightly. "It doesn't say Chloe." The kitchen fell dead silent. Only the hum of the refrigerator could be heard. "What are you talking about?" Mom snatched the letter out of his hands, her eyes darting across the page. I watched her read it. I watched the exact moment her brain processed the words. Her jaw slacked. Her eyes widened so far, I thought they might pop out of her skull. The triumphant flush on her cheeks instantly morphed into a sickly, pale white. That's impossible," Mom whispered. "What does it say?" Chloe whined, trying to grab it back. Dad cleared his throat, looking at me with a mixture of shock and newfound awe. "It says, 'We are delighted to inform you that your daughter, Harper Bennet, has achieved a score of 99.9 percentile. She has broken the state record. Furthermore, due to the unprecedented nature of her score, we request the immediate presence of the Bennet family at the Milton Academy Gala this evening, where Harper will be formally presented with the Vanguard Scholarship.'" "No!" Mom shrieked, tearing at her hair. "No, it's a mistake. The school made a mistake." "It's not a mistake, Mom," I said softly, stepping out of the shadows. I tilted my head, looking up at her with innocent, wide eyes. "I guess I just did really well on the puzzles." "Shut up," Mom snarled, lunging forward and grabbing my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin. "You cheated. You must have cheated. There is no way you beat Chloe. You're an idiot." Before Dad could intervene to pull her off me, the doorbell rang. It wasn't a normal chime. It was a heavy, authoritative knock. Dad pulled the door open. Standing on our porch, flanked by two men in dark suits, was Dr. Eris Gallagher. The rain poured behind him, but he looked completely immaculate. "Mr. Bennet, I presume?" Dr. Gallagher said, stepping into the foyer without being invited. His cold, calculating eyes immediately locked onto my mother, who had frozen, still gripping my arm. "And you must be Mrs. Bennet." "Dr. Gallagher!" Mom gasped, instantly letting go of me and pasting on a frantic, desperate smile. "Thank God you're here. There's been a terrible mix-up with the mail. You sent the acceptance letter to the wrong twin. Chloe is the genius. Harper is precisely who the letter was intended for, Mrs. Bennet," Dr. Gallagher interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a frozen blade. "But let me be perfectly clear." Dr. Gallagher took a step forward, towering over her. "We grade the exams via barcode. When the machine scanned the barcode assigned to Chloe Bennett, it produced a score of 99.9%. When it scanned the barcode for Harper, it produced a 42%. Mom let out a breath of relief, laughing hysterically. "See? I told you, it's Chloe. You just printed the wrong name on the letter." "I am not finished," Dr. Gallagher thundered, silencing her instantly. "Due to an anonymous tip regarding a breach in protocol, I personally reviewed the physical test booklets. Upon opening the booklet bearing Chloe's barcode, I found the handwriting did not match the name printed on the cover. Furthermore, he reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was the final page of a test booklet. On the bottom corner, stark and undeniable, was a brown, dried smudge of blood. I matched the DNA of this blood droplet using our private labs yesterday," Dr. Gallagher said softly. "It belongs to Harper. Someone, Mrs. Bennett, broke into my office, peeled the stickers off the booklets, and swapped them, attempting to steal this child's rightful future and give it to the other." Mom stumbled backward, hitting the kitchen counter. She looked like she was going to vomit. Dad looked at her, his face twisting in disgust. "You did what?" Dad whispered, horrified. "It wasn't me," Mom screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She's lying. She set me up. Look at her. She's an evil little—" "If you finish that sentence, Mrs. Bennett, I will have you arrested for fraud, trespassing, and child endangerment," Dr. Gallagher said smoothly. "The police are fully aware of the situation. However, the board of directors wishes to avoid a public scandal. We will not press charges on one condition." Mom was sobbing now, sliding down the cabinets to sit on the floor. Chloe was wailing, finally realizing she wasn't getting the shiny new life she was promised. "What condition?" Dad asked, stepping between Dr. Gallagher and my mother, protecting me. Dr. Gallagher looked down at me, a rare, genuine smile touching his lips. "Harper comes with me. Tonight, she will be enrolled at Milton as a ward of the academy. She will receive the best education money can buy, and you, Mrs. Bennett, will sign away your parental rights and never ever attempt to contact her again." I looked at my mother, weeping pathetically on the linoleum floor. I looked at Chloe, throwing a tantrum and ruining her new pink sweater. The 28-year-old ghost inside my chest took a deep, satisfying breath. The revenge was sweet, but this was only the beginning. They hadn't lost everything yet. I was going to make sure they did. The heavy oak doors of the Milton Academy closed behind me, sealing my new reality. The Vanguard Gala was a dizzying blur of crystal chandeliers, silk dresses, and the intoxicating scent of old money. I stood on a podium, a tiny 8-year-old in a hastily tailored Milton uniform, shaking hands with tech moguls, senators, and philanthropic billionaires. They looked at me like a prized racehorse. I looked at them like chess pieces. My private dorm room was larger than my entire childhood home. It had a mahogany desk, an ensuite bathroom, and a brass-framed bed with sheets so soft they felt like water. But as I sat on the edge of that bed on my first night, staring out at the manicured campus bathed in moonlight, my mind was not on luxury. It was on war. In my previous life, Chloe had built her empire on a single, revolutionary piece of software, a predictive, algorithmic network called Omni. It was pitched as a social data mining tool, but it evolved into an omnipotent digital infrastructure bought out by the government for billions. Chloe took all the credit, gracing the covers of Forbes and Time, but Chloe didn't write Omni. Chloe was a parasite. During her sophomore year of college, Chloe had seduced a brilliant, socially crippled Milton alumnus, stolen his source code while he slept, and used her mother's illegally obtained connections to patent it under her own shell company. She drove the real creator to bankruptcy, and eventually to a quiet suicide. His name was Leo Carmichael. The next morning, I walked into the advanced computer science lab. It was an intimidating room filled with humming servers and older students. I scanned the rows of glowing monitors until I found him. Leo was 10 years old, a frail boy with a mop of unruly brown hair and thick, tape-repaired glasses. He was hunched over a mechanical keyboard, violently typing lines of code, completely ignoring the half-eaten sandwich next to him. I pulled up a chair and dragged it right next to his, climbing onto it so I could see his screen. "You have a memory leak in your sorting array," I said casually, pointing a small finger at line 412. "If you compile that, it's going to crash the server in about 3 minutes." Leo jumped, nearly knocking over his juice box. He stared at me, then back at his screen, his eyes scanning the code. A deep flush of embarrassment crept up his neck. I didn't see that," he stammered, frantically hitting the backspace key. "Who are you?" "I'm Harper," I smiled, holding out my hand. "I think we're going to be best friends, Leo. Rule number 1 of rewriting history: secure the assets before the enemy even knows they exist." Over the next few months, I became Leo's shadow. I didn't just protect him from the bullies who mocked his stutter. I became his intellectual equal. I guided his erratic genius, subtly introducing him to the foundational concepts of predictive networking, years before he would have naturally discovered them. We were building Omni, but this time it was built in a fortress of my design, fortified with impenetrable legal patents, under a trust that no Bennett could ever touch. Chloe's future empire was now locked safely in my pocket. Now, it was time to address the present. It was time to deal with Rebecca. While I was thriving in a world of privilege, my mother's world was violently imploding. As a Vanguard scholar, I was granted a generous monthly stipend for research and development, managed by a fiduciary at the academy. Because my intellect had been classified as an anomaly, I petitioned for and won emancipation from my parents, giving me full control over my finances. I immediately invested the stipend into high-yield tech stocks I knew were about to explode in 2004. By the time I was 10, my personal portfolio was in the mid-six figures. I used a fraction of it to hire a private investigator, a former corporate espionage agent named David Rossi. His weekly reports on the Bennett household were my favorite bedtime reading. The fallout from the test day had been catastrophic. My father, Arthur, had finally woken up from his decade-long coma of passivity. Horrified by Rebecca's monstrous attempt to switch the tests and sacrifice me, he filed for divorce. Rebecca, arrogant and delusional, fought him in court. She demanded the house, full custody of Chloe, and exorbitant alimony, claiming she sacrificed her career for the family. But she didn't know I was pulling the strings from the shadows. I anonymously mailed Rossi's meticulously gathered evidence of Rebecca's credit card fraud, which she had committed to buy Chloe's genius wardrobe, directly to Dad's lawyer. I also leaked the sealed incident report from the Milton Academy to the local school board, framing it as a concerned citizen tip. The resulting divorce settlement was a massacre. The asset liquidation of Rebecca Bennett, 2006, asset liability resulting action status family home. Awarded to Arthur Bennett. Rebecca forced to vacate. Lost alimony denied, due to proven financial fraud and marital dissipation of assets. Zeroed credit card debt, $45,000, transferred entirely to Rebecca's name. Active liability custody of Chloe 50-50 split, but Rebecca required to pay child support based on minimum wage imputation. Financial drain. Rebecca was evicted. She moved into a cramped, mold-infested apartment on the bad side of town. Ironically, a place much like the basement she had intended to keep me in forever. Without Arthur's income, she was forced to take on 3 minimum wage jobs. She cleaned houses. She scrubbed toilets. She lived the exact life she had deemed fitting for me. And Chloe? Chloe was suffering the hardest fall of all. Stripped of the delusion that she was a prodigy, she was thrown into the brutal reality of the public school system. For years, I had been doing her homework and feeding her the answers just to keep the peace. Without me, her grades plummeted. She failed math. She failed reading comprehension. Rossi sent me a video one afternoon. It was a recording of a middle school parent-teacher conference. On the screen, Rebecca looked 10 years older, her hair unkempt, her cheap clothes stained with bleach. She was screaming at a tired-looking math teacher. "My daughter is a genius!" Rebecca shrieked, slamming her fist on the desk. "The Milton Academy said so. You're just a terrible teacher who doesn't know how to challenge her." "Mrs. Bennett," the teacher sighed, pushing a heavily red-inked test across the desk. "Chloe cannot do long division. She is in the 6th grade. She is not a genius. She needs remedial tutoring, or she will be held back." Chloe sat in the corner of the room, chewing her fingernails, her face a mask of bitter, humiliated rage. She had spent her entire childhood being told she was royalty, only to discover she was a peasant. I closed the laptop, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. They were broken, but broken people are dangerous. And I knew Chloe wouldn't give up on her delusions of grandeur that easily. I just had to wait for her to try and climb back up 8 years later. 2012. I was 16 years old, and the world was mine. Leo and I were seated in the sleek, glass-walled conference room of our newly incorporated company, Aegis Dynamics. We had just finalized the beta version of Omni, and venture capitalists were already foaming at the mouth, offering 8-figure investments for a mere 5% stake. I wore a sharp, tailored black suit, my hair pulled back into a severe bun. I looked out over the Chicago skyline, the very same skyline where I had bled out on a marble floor in another lifetime. "Harper, we have an issue with the applicant pool for the summer incubator," Leo said, looking up from his tablet. He was no longer the frail boy with taped glasses. He was confident, sharp, and fiercely loyal to me. "The selection committee flagged a submission for plagiarism. It's pretty blatant." "Let the committee handle it," I said, waving a hand dismissively. We hosted a summer incubator program for high school students, offering a $100,000 grant to the most promising tech pitch. It was great PR. "You might want to look at the name on the file first," Leo insisted, sliding the tablet across the polished mahogany table. I looked down. Applicant name: Chloe Bennett. High school: Oak Park Public High. Project proposal: ConnectSphere, a predictive social networking algorithm. My blood ran ice cold, and then a slow, dark smile stretched across my face. She was trying it again. Even without Milton, even without the money, the universe was somehow pulling her toward the exact same grift. She was attempting to pitch a crude, stolen knockoff of the very algorithm Leo and I had just perfected. "Did she write this code?" I asked softly. Leo scoffed. Not a chance. I ran it through our backend scrubbers. The base architecture was ripped straight from a GitHub repository belonging to an MIT undergrad, and the front-end UI is a badly photoshopped ripoff of Facebook. It's a joke. I'll send the rejection email. No, I said, standing up and buttoning my suit jacket. Approve her application. Invite her to the final pitch presentation this Friday. Put her on the main stage. Leo frowned, confused. Why? It's stolen garbage. Because, Leo, I murmured, staring at my reflection in the glass window. Sometimes, letting someone build a castle on quicksand is the only way to ensure they drown. Friday evening arrived with all the pomp and circumstance of a Silicon Valley gala. The auditorium was packed with investors, tech journalists, and industry scouts. I sat in the center seat of the judges' panel, hidden slightly by the dimmed house lights. Backstage, I knew Chloe was preparing. According to my security team, she had dragged Rebecca along. They had likely pawned whatever they had left to buy Chloe's cheap, ill-fitting business suit, desperate for the $100,000 grant that would finally put them back on top. The host called her name. Next up, representing Oak Park, Chloe Bennett, pitching ConnectSphere. Chloe strode out onto the stage. She looked so much like the woman who had murdered me, it made my skin crawl. She had that same arrogant strut, that same entitled smirk. She grabbed the microphone, completely unaware of who was sitting in the darkness just 30 feet away. Good evening, Chloe beamed, clicking her presentation remote. A flashy, poorly designed logo appeared on the massive screen behind her. The future of social media isn't just about connecting, it's about predicting. ConnectSphere uses a revolutionary proprietary algorithm that I built from the ground up to anticipate user needs before they even type them. She spent 10 minutes delivering a pitch built entirely on lies. She spoke with absolute conviction, batting her eyelashes at the investors in the front row, playing the part of the struggling, undiscovered prodigy. When she finished, she struck a triumphant pose, waiting for the applause. There was a smattering of polite clapping. Then, the house lights on the judges' panel flared to life. I leaned into my microphone. A fascinating presentation, Miss Bennett. Chloe shielded her eyes from the sudden glare, peering down at the panel. When her eyes locked onto mine, she froze. The color instantly drained from her face. Her jaw dropped. Harper, she breathed into the microphone, the sound echoing through the silent auditorium. It is Miss Bennett, actually. I am the CEO of Aegis Dynamics, the sponsor of this grant, I said, my voice projecting crisp and clear over the speakers. I didn't break eye contact. I have a few questions regarding your proprietary algorithm. What are you doing here? Chloe stammered, stepping backward, looking desperately around the room, as if realizing she had walked into a trap. I am judging your work, I said, coldly. I tapped my tablet, mirroring my screen to the massive projector behind her. Her flashy logo vanished, replaced by 2 side-by-side blocks of code. On the left, we have the core architecture for ConnectSphere, which you claim to have written from scratch, I announced to the room. Murmurs began to ripple through the audience. On the right, we have an open-source repository, uploaded by an MIT student named David Chen 3 years ago. As you can see, the code is identical. You didn't even bother to change the variable names or remove his developer notes in the margins. That's a lie, Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking. I wrote it. It's mine. Furthermore, I continued, ignoring her panic, my voice a relentless hammer. The conceptual framework you are pitching is a direct, albeit rudimentary, infringement on a patent filed by Aegis Dynamics 6 months ago for our software, Omni. The room erupted into furious whispers. Investors were shaking their heads in disgust. Tech journalists were furiously typing on their laptops. Plagiarism in this industry was a career-ending death sentence. Doing it on a live stage, in front of the most powerful people in the city, was a public execution. "You set me up!" Chloe screamed at me, tears of pure rage streaming down her face. She pointed at me, her hand trembling. "You're trying to ruin me! You've always been jealous of me." "Jealous of what, exactly?" I asked quietly, though the microphone picked it up perfectly. The absolute indifference in my tone was the killing blow. Chloe had no answer. She stood alone on the massive stage, completely exposed. She wasn't a genius. She wasn't a prodigy. She was a fraud. And now, the entire world knew it. "Miss Bennett," I said, rendering the final verdict, "your application is rejected. You are disqualified from this incubator. Security will escort you off the premises. And be advised, Aegis Dynamics will be sending a cease and desist letter to your residence regarding your intellectual property theft." 2 burly security guards stepped onto the stage, flanking Chloe. Off in the wings, I saw a commotion. Rebecca had breached the backstage area. She ran out into the stage lights, looking unhinged, her clothes haggard. "Stop!" Rebecca yelled, trying to push past the guards to get to Chloe. "You can't do this. Do you know who we are? My daughter is a genius. She's a vanguard." Rebecca's eyes suddenly landed on me, sitting in the center chair of power, flanked by billionaires and industry titans. The words died in her throat. I looked at the woman who had condemned me to a life of misery and held me down to die. I gave her a slow, chilling smile, tilting my head exactly as I had when I was 8 years old in that kitchen. Rebecca collapsed to her knees on the stage, sobbing hysterically as the reality of her broken life finally, completely shattered her mind. The guards grabbed them both, dragging them kicking and screaming into the shadows of the wings. I turned off my microphone, leaned back in my leather chair, and watched them go. 4 years later, 2016. By the time I turned 20, Aegis Dynamics went public. The IPO was the largest in tech history, valuing the company at over $40 billion. I stood on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange, wearing a custom white Dior suit, and rang the opening bell. Confetti rained down like snow. Flashing cameras blinded the room, and my face was plastered on every financial billboard, from Times Square to Tokyo. I was a billionaire. I was untouchable. But true revenge isn't just about ascending to the heavens. It's about making sure your enemies are securely fastened to the floor of hell. David Rossi, my head of security and personal investigator, placed a thick manila folder on my mahogany desk later that evening in my Chicago headquarters. The tab read, "Bennett C&R, status critical." "They've hit rock bottom, Harper," Rossi said, pouring himself a bourbon from my cart. He was a grizzled man who had seen the worst of humanity, but even he looked slightly disgusted by the contents of the file. "After you humiliated them at the incubator 4 years ago, Rebecca had a total psychological breakdown. She lost her cleaning jobs. They got evicted from the apartment. They're living out of a rusted 1998 Honda Civic in a trailer park outside Gary, Indiana." I opened the folder, flipping through grainy surveillance photos. Chloe, now 20, looked hollowed out. Her blonde hair was greasy and matted, her face gaunt, Her clothes, literal rags. The prodigy who was supposed to rule Silicon Valley was caught on camera stealing cans of soup from a gas station. Rebecca looked even worse, a phantom of the arrogant, polished woman who used to sneer at me in our kitchen. "Is that all?" I asked, my voice devoid of pity. "No." Rossi leaned forward, his expression hardening. Desperation breeds stupidity. For the past 3 weeks, Chloe has been meeting with a low-level enforcer connected to the Russian mob, a guy named Gregory Yudin. She's been trying to pawn off a fake diamond ring to buy something. Buy what? Rossi tapped a photograph of Chloe, handing Yudin a crumpled envelope. A ghost gun, unregistered, and a digital lock bypass kit. She's been staking out your new residence, Harper. She knows about the penthouse. A dark, terrifying thrill shot down my spine. The penthouse. When I purchased my primary residence, I hadn't just bought any luxury property. I had spent millions renovating the top floor of the Gold Coast Tower to look exactly, flawlessly, down to the very last architectural detail, like the penthouse Chloe had lived in during my previous life. I imported the exact same Italian marble for the floor. I bought the exact same Persian rug. I hung the exact same crystal chandelier. I built the stage of my own murder. I just needed the actors to arrive. "She thinks she can force you to sign over your assets," Rossi said, shaking his head. "Or she plans to kill you and forge a will. It's pathetic. It's a suicide mission. I have a tactical team ready to raid the trailer park tonight. We can have them locked up for conspiracy to commit murder before sunrise." "No," I said softly, closing the folder. Rossi blinked. "Harper, they are armed and unhinged. You don't play games with cornered rats." "I'm not playing a game, David. I'm closing a loop." I stood up, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline. "Pull the security detail off the penthouse tomorrow night. Deactivate the perimeter alarms on the private elevator. Leave the back door open." Rossi stared at me like I had lost my mind. "You want to let them in? I want them to think they've won," I replied, the reflection in the glass showing a smile that belonged to a 28-year-old ghost. "I want them to walk into the slaughterhouse on their own 2 feet. The storm rolled in on Thursday night, a torrential downpour that battered the glass walls of my penthouse. The thunder masked the mechanical hum of the private elevator ascending to the top floor. I was sitting in a high-backed leather armchair in the center of the living room, shrouded in shadows. The only light came from the lightning flashes illuminating the imported marble floor and the grand chandelier above. Ding! The elevator doors pried open with a muted hiss. 2 figures stepped out, dripping wet, smelling of cheap gasoline, stale sweat, and sheer desperation. "The alarms are dead, just like Yudin said," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling with adrenaline. "Hurry!" Rebecca hissed, coughing a wet, rattling cough. "Find her bedroom. We tie her up, force her to sign the proxy forms, and then we do it, just like we practiced. It has to look like an overdose." I listened to them creep across the marble, their wet shoes squeaking softly. They were moving toward the hallway. "You always were terribly predictable, Chloe," I said, my voice echoing through the cavernous room. They both shrieked, spinning around. Chloe raised a heavy black handgun, aiming it blindly into the darkness. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely hold it straight. Rebecca clutched her chest, her eyes wide with terror. "Turn the lights on," Chloe screamed. "Do it, Harper, or I'll shoot you in the dark." I reached out and pressed the button on the smart hub next to my chair. The chandelier flared to life, bathing the room in brilliant, blinding white light. I didn't move. I just sat there, wearing a silk robe, sipping a glass of sparkling water, legs crossed. Chloe stared at me, her eyes bloodshot, her face twisted in a mask of feral hatred. She looked around the room, taking in the unimaginable wealth, the art, the marble. The jealousy radiating from her was so potent it was practically choking her. "Put the water down," Chloe snarled, stepping forward, the gun leveled at my head. "And if I don't?" I asked smoothly. "We're taking it all back," Rebecca screamed, stepping out from behind her daughter. She looked like a witch from a nightmare, her teeth rotting, her skin gray. "You stole our lives. You stole Chloe's company. You ruined my marriage. You took everything from us, you evil little freak. Now you're going to give it back. We have the legal documents. Sign them." Rebecca threw a crumpled stack of papers onto the coffee table. They were crude, forged transfer of power documents, utterly worthless in a court of law. But to their deranged minds, it was their golden ticket. "You think a piece of paper signed under duress holds up against $1 billion corporate legal team?" I laughed, a genuine, cold sound. "You're even dumber than I remember, Mother." "Shut up!" Chloe roared, lunging forward and pressing the cold steel barrel of the gun directly against my forehead. "I'll kill you. I'll blow your brains all over this expensive rug. Sign it." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I looked up the barrel of the gun and then into Chloe's panicked eyes. "You won't shoot me, Chloe," I whispered, "because if you shoot me, there's a loud noise. Blood everywhere. Forensics. You don't want a messy murder. You want a quiet tragedy." Chloe's breath hitched. How did I know? I slowly stood up, pushing the barrel of the gun aside with one finger. Chloe was so stunned by my lack of fear, she actually let me do it. "You want an accidental overdose," I continued, pacing slowly around them. "A predator circling its prey. That's why you brought the syringe, didn't you? The industrial antifreeze, colorless, odorless, mimicking a massive heart attack or an aneurysm, just like you planned." Chloe dropped the gun to her side, her jaw slacking. How do you know about the syringe?" She reached into her soaked jacket pocket and pulled out a large medical syringe, filled with a thick, clear liquid. The moment I saw it, a phantom pain flared in my neck, the memory of dying on this exact floor, looking up at that exact chandelier, rushed over me. But this time, I wasn't the victim. I was the architect. Because, Chloe, I know everything you are going to do before you even think to do it. I stopped pacing and faced them, the smile dropping from my face, replaced by a gaze so cold it seemed to freeze the air in the room. "Look down." Chloe and Rebecca looked down at the floor. "Do you like the marble?" I asked softly. I had it imported from the same quarry in Italy that supplied the stone for your penthouse, the one you were supposed to buy. "Do you like the Persian rug? It's the exact same weave." "What are you talking about?" Rebecca whispered, shrinking back. "You're insane." 20 years ago, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm octave, "I died on this floor. I choked on my own blood, while you, Mother, pinned my arms down. And you, Chloe, plunged that exact syringe into my neck. I died because I found the test results, the real ones." They stared at me in horrified silence. They had absolutely no idea what I was talking about, but the utter conviction in my voice, the demonic certainty in my eyes, paralyzed them. "I came back," I stepped closer, closing the distance until I was inches from Chloe's face. I woke up in that miserable bed at 8 years old, and I swore to God I would take everything you ever loved, everything you ever wanted, and turn it to ash. I let you cheat on the test. I left the blood on the paper. I called the principal. I orchestrated the divorce. I bankrupted you. I bought your algorithm just to watch you plagiarize it, so I could destroy you on stage. I am the author of every single misery you have suffered for the last 12 years. Rebecca let out a guttural, wounded sound, collapsing to her knees on the marble. The realization that their ruin wasn't bad luck, but a meticulously engineered execution, broke whatever was left of her mind. You, Chloe choked, tears streaming down her face, raising the syringe like a dagger. You ruined my life. I corrected the timeline, I hissed. Chloe screamed, a primal sound of rage, and lunged at me, thrusting the needle toward my neck. I didn't move. I didn't need to. Before the needle could even graze my skin, a massive, deafening crack shattered the glass of the balcony doors. A stun grenade detonated in the center of the living room, blinding us all in a flash of magnesium light. The doors flew open. 12 heavily armed tactical officers from the Chicago Police Department SWAT team poured into the room, assault rifles raised, laser sights painting Chloe and Rebecca in a sea of red dots. Drop the weapon! Get on the ground! Now! The lead officer roared. Chloe shrieked in terror, dropping the syringe and the gun. She fell to the floor, covering her ears. Rebecca was already weeping into the rug. Officers swarmed them, slamming their faces into the cold marble, wrenching their arms behind their backs, and ratcheting heavy steel handcuffs onto their wrists. David Rossi stepped out from the private hallway behind me, lowering a remote control. He had been monitoring the entire conversation from the panic room. The room was rigged with hidden 4K cameras and directional microphones, broadcasting a live feed directly to the police captain. Attempted murder, armed extortion, possession of an illegal firearm, and breaking and entering. Rossi listed off, looking down at the two pathetic women writhing on the floor. He looked up at me. Are you injured, Miss Bennett? I looked down at Chloe. Her cheek was pressed against the marble, right in the exact spot my head had rested when I bled to death in my past life. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with the terrified realization that her life was entirely, permanently over. No, David, I said, smoothing out the lapels of my silk robe. I feel completely reborn. The trial, officially titled The State of Illinois versus Chloe and Rebecca Bennett, was the media event of the decade. The tabloids dubbed it the penthouse plot. I attended every single day of the proceedings, sitting in the front row of the gallery directly behind the prosecutor's table. I wore impeccably tailored neutral suits, playing the part of the stoic, traumatized billionaire victim to perfection. Because of the high-definition audio and video recordings captured by David Rossi's hidden cameras, the defense had absolutely nothing. Their high-priced lawyer, paid for by a predatory loan Rebecca had taken out, tried to argue entrapment. It fell apart the moment the prosecutor, a ruthless woman named Amanda Hayes, played the 4K footage of Chloe lunging at me with a syringe full of industrial antifreeze. The courtroom gasped collectively. The jury's faces paled in unison. When Chloe took the stand, her fragile ego couldn't handle Amanda's cross-examination. After 10 minutes of being pressed on her plagiarized code and her failed tech pitches, Chloe completely snapped. She screamed at the jury, thrashing against the bailiffs, shrieking that I had stolen her destiny and that she deserved my wealth. It was the final nail in her meticulously crafted coffin. The jury deliberated for less than 45 minutes. Judge Harrison Miller didn't hold back during sentencing. He looked down at them with undisguised revulsion. In all my years on the bench, I have rarely seen such calculated, venomous greed, he stated, his voice echoing through the silent courtroom. To attempt to murder your own flesh and blood out of sheer envy is a darkness I cannot comprehend. Chloe Bennett was sentenced to 35 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. Rebecca Bennett, due to her direct involvement, previous fraud history, and conspiracy charges, was sentenced to 25 years. They were stripped of their names, their civilian clothes, and their remaining shreds of dignity, reduced to numbers printed on coarse orange jumpsuits. 6 months after their sentencing, the dust had settled. Aegis Dynamics stock had tripled. My net worth crossed the $50 billion threshold, and I finally requested a private visitation at the Marion Federal Penitentiary. I arrived in a sleek, black armored SUV. The prison was a bleak fortress of concrete and razor wire, rising like a gray tombstone out of the barren Illinois landscape. The air inside smelled faintly of institutional bleach, rust, and hopeless despair. I sat down in a sterile interrogation room, separated by a pane of thick, smudged, bulletproof glass. 5 minutes later, the heavy steel door on the other side buzzed open. 2 armed guards escorted them in. The physical transformation was staggering. The false royalty had been entirely scrubbed away. They were gaunt, bruised, and broken. Chloe's once perfect blonde hair was a greasy, matted mess chopped haphazardly at her jawline. Rebecca walked with a slight limp, her eyes darting nervously around the room like a frightened animal. The fluorescent lights highlighted every hollow contour of their miserable, aged faces. I picked up the black telephone receiver on my side of the glass. Slowly, with trembling, calloused hands, Chloe picked up her receiver. Rebecca leaned in close to listen, her eyes vacant and haunted. "Why did you come here?" Chloe whispered, her voice raspy and thin from disuse. "Haven't you done enough? You won. Just leave us alone." "I didn't come to gloat, Chloe. I came to deliver a message," I said, my voice crisp and authoritative through the speaker. "In your past life, you built an empire on the blood and sweat of others. You, Mother, lived like a queen while charging me rent to sleep on a cot. You locked your own daughter in a basement and treated her like a pest. You both thought you were untouchable gods." Rebecca began to cry silently. The tears tracked through the grime on her cheeks, pooling at her jaw. "Harper, please," Rebecca sobbed into the receiver, her voice cracking in a pathetic attempt to manipulate me one last time. "I'm your mother. I gave you life. Please, can't you talk to the warden? They treat us like animals in here. I'll do anything. I'm so sorry." "You gave me an existence, Rebecca," I corrected her, my tone devoid of a single ounce of empathy. "I gave myself a life, and you aren't sorry you tried to kill me. You're just sorry you got caught." Rebecca recoiled, as if I had physically struck her. "But back to my point," I continued, turning my gaze entirely to Chloe, whose dead eyes were staring blankly at the metal counter. "Gods don't belong in concrete boxes, and I want you to know exactly who built your box. Last week, Aegis Dynamics signed an exclusive, sweeping government contract to manage the internal security and communication software for the entire federal prison system." Chloe's head slowly snapped up. Her eyes widened slightly in horrific realization. "Do you know what that means, Chloe?" I asked softly, leaning closer to the glass. It means my company's algorithms run the facial recognition cameras that watch you walk the yard. I own the servers that log your restricted phone calls. I own the database that tracks your commissary. I own the electronic lock protocols on your cell doors. No, Chloe gasped, stumbling backward on her metal stool. You are trapped in a cage, and I hold the master key, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. For the rest of your natural lives, every breath you take, every step you make, is processed by my infrastructure. You belong to me, utterly and completely. You're a monster, Chloe shrieked, slamming her fists against the bulletproof glass, her face twisting in pure agony. You're a demon. No, I smiled, a cold, serene expression of absolute, final victory. I'm a genius. Enjoy the basement, Mother. I hung up the phone. The sharp click echoed loudly in the silent room, severing the connection forever. I stood up, smoothed my custom blazer, and walked out of the prison. I didn't look back as Chloe's muffled screams pounded against the reinforced glass. Outside, the heavy iron gates slid open. The sun was shining brilliantly on the tarmac where my private helicopter waited, its rotors already spinning up. I took a deep breath of the crisp, fresh air. The world was vast, beautiful, and completely mine. The scales were finally balanced, and the ghost of the girl on the marble floor could finally rest in peace. And that is how you execute the perfect, mastermind revenge. If you loved watching Harper dismantle her evil mother and sister piece by piece, hit that like button right now to show your support. Don't forget to share this incredible Reborn drama with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more satisfying stories of karma and justice. Drop a comment below and tell me, what was the most satisfying moment of Harper's revenge for you? See you in the next video.